Welcome to NC Tweener Talks, powered by NC Idea, a weekly podcast by builders for builders, where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from North Carolina. Now, here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the NC Tweener Fund, Scott Wingo.
First, a huge thank you to our platinum sponsor. NC Idea Foundation fosters sustainable economic development with competitive grants and programs for entrepreneurs and funding to strengthen the North Carolina entrepreneurial ecosystem. First, a huge thank you to our gold sponsors. Today, we are featuring EisnerAmper. EisnerAmper helps tech companies from startups to public enterprises navigate growth with tailored accounting, tax, advisory, and outsourcing solutions. They have deep industry knowledge, support over 2,100 technology companies as well as investors. We'd also like to recognize our silver sponsors. Today, we are featuring Bank of America. Bank of America's transformative tech group provides the stability and scalability that tech companies need to rapidly grow today and into the future. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for supporting the North Carolina Tweener Talks and the entire Tweener community. It takes an ecosystem to build a thriving community, and sponsors like these are invaluable. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Talks. My guest today is Nick Genty. He is the co-founder and CEO of AgEye. I discovered AgEye while going to lunch, and we're going to tell that story, so I don't want to spoil it. And it's been a fun adventure. I really like this intersection of hardware and software, and this is we're continuing that series here. So far, we've talked about Planted, Natrix. We've got a couple other coming up. The sequence may be out, but you'll get a feeling for this. We're really focusing on North Carolina companies that have a hardware or a physical component and a software component. I think if you think about moats in the AI era, these companies, that physical component gives you a moat, like doing something hard in the physical world. There's supply chains, vertical integration, and things that you add to the mix that don't really exist in the software world. But then many of them also have the side benefit of proprietary data. So as other founders out there listening to this, Nick is going to impart a lot of great wisdom on you. How did they take a technology, go to market? How did they find those first customers? How did they figure out the first product within their technology? And how are they exploring? And they're kind of in that tweener land where they've had a fair amount of success, but now they're trying a lot of different things to get that next big leg of growth. I really enjoyed my conversation with Nick. He's a natural-born storyteller and salesman, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Talks. I'm your host, Scott Wingo. And today we're continuing our series of North Carolina startups that you probably don't know about, that are doing really cool things in the physical world. Joining me today is Nick Genty. He is CEO and co-founder of AgEye. Nick, welcome to the pod.
Hey, Scott. Good morning. Thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah. And I was informed this is your first podcast appearance, so it's an exclusive.
It's an
first look exclusive. So we're very excited to have you. Rare first appearance.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm a comic book collector, and first appearances is where all the money is. So this one's going to be valuable. Put this in your collection, folks. Appreciate you coming on. I know you're probably nervous being your first podcast, so don't worry. It's not going to be stressful. This is not 60 minutes by any stretch of the imagination. I always like to start, our audience is largely founders like you and I always think it's helpful for them to kind of start at the beginning. Like, are you from North Carolina? What's your background? Before we get into the company, like what led you to start a company?
Sure. So I'm all intent and purposes from Raleigh, North Carolina, grew up here since elementary school, and then went to school at East Carolina, did undergrad and graduate degree at ECU, and then moved back to Raleigh. Started working at a graduate school at Administrative Department of Courts for the North Carolina court system, doing IT project management. And that's where I ended up meeting my first co-founder, John Dominic. And that was back in 2006, 2007, and just ended up staying connected with him through the years. He and I have launched a few ventures together, and AgEye's the latest one.
Got it. And what did you study at ECU?
I did business.
Okay, just general business.
Yep, general business.
Awesome. And then I do think there's like being a pirate definitely ties into. There's a little bit of pirateness in being an entrepreneur. You got to kind of go in and disrupt industries and take no prisoners and all that kind of stuff. Yield no quarter, all the piratey things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then, so you went from a business degree to like working in the court system, which I imagine is kind of like basically a pretty cushy state or local type government job. Why leave that awesome situation and do this crazy thing you're doing? What did you just hate that and it wasn't you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was an interesting project, and so this was 2005, 2006. A lot of the databases for the various law enforcement agencies were not interconnected. So if you had a warrant for your arrest in Charlotte and you got arrested in Raleigh, there would be no way to correlate those two, right? So helping lead the implementation of that warrant repository system for the state. But at the end of the day, it was a state government job, and that works well for some individuals, but definitely wanted to have a little bit more excitement, if you will. So I left that and joined a early startup that you know very well, rPath, and worked to really cut my teeth on learning how venture-backed software companies work. And that was a great great team to lead from. And that led us on the entrepreneur path.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's like, there's this idea in Silicon Valley of mafias, and they're not like the criminal mafia, but there's like the PayPal mafia is the most famous one. We have a couple of mafias in the triangle. We have a Pendo mafia, a Channel Advisor mafia, and then a Red Hat mafia. So in a weird way, you're the beneficiary of the Red Hat mafia because some Red Hat folks left and started rPath, and then ultimately didn't Red Hat buy it?
It was SaaS.
SaaS. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And then, so then, you were this is why entrepreneurship at a local level is important, because it kind of like is this flywheel that builds. Like if Red Hat hadn't been founded here, we wouldn't have had rPath, and that probably, who knows if you would have had a gateway into entrepreneurship if you didn't have a place to cut your teeth, get some confidence, and then go out and do your own thing. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the leadership from like Todd at Pendo and who we worked with, Eric Trone at rPath, and just they kind of continue to move in circles, right? And generate a lot of value wherever they end up. It's to your point, it's a great seeding for additional companies.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so you're at rPath, and then what did you just follow that through the conclusion at SaaS, or did you leave to start AgEye?
Yep. So I was doing business development for rPath, and then a year before SaaS acquired the assets of rPath, I saw an opportunity. This was 2010, 2011. The Android operating system had come out. iPhone had been out for a little while, but there was a lot of enterprises that were still looking at how do they port over some of their application code, their legacy architecture onto some of these mobile platforms. And they weren't necessarily ready to engage full-time in-house developers. And so, definitely saw that as an opportunity for a pretty lucrative professional services organization. And so my partner and I, John Dominic, we founded Iconic Solutions at that same time. And it was purely B2B, looking at companies who, in our mind, it was their website was the cash register, right? So think about we've worked with Carfax, we worked with NADA, we worked with Harris Teeter. So a lot of these companies, Live Nation, that primarily were an e-commerce company, and then looking at how to expand out to the mobile platform. And so it would just be a multi-month professional services contract where we ported over, and that worked great. And so it went from learning, the bureaucratic red tape of some of the government-based projects, which were very well-defined RFP style projects that took a lot of, paperwork, to more of the fast and dirty startup through rPath, right? Is it customers come in and they want tweaks, changes through professional services, and there's a lot of money in professional services on top of SaaS revenue. And so, took all of that and put it into Iconic Solutions and saw that it was a real opportunity. So we scaled that out. Around 2014, 2015, we started focusing solely on more regulated markets. So that's med devices, that's pharmaceuticals, that clinical research organizations. So that was a little bit harder of a market for some individuals to break into. At that point, mobile development, mobile apps were becoming much more of a commodity, right? And a lot of kids coming out of high school and college knew how to write apps. And so we were looking at ways to continue to differentiate ourselves, and that regulated market did it. And through that, we were able to work with again, going back to your comment on local triangle companies. So one of Neil that formed Cree, after Cree went public, then he spun out a couple different companies, and one of them is called No Bio, and that early company was it was called Novan at that time, but then it was what was it called? Revian now, and they were using red light therapy, right? And so this was 2016. I mean, this is 10 years ago. They were really pushing the boundaries on red light therapy from a aesthetics and a health aspect. And so we started working on that with them, doing a lot of the development, right? We would engage them for professional services on the IoT, the embedded development, the full stack development. And so working with that, we really discovered this link between hardware and software. It's specifically around using environmental variables like light to enhance biology, right? And so what we saw they were working on in a clinical space to be able to improve skin or increase your, regrow hair. It was fascinating, but we knew that's a long pathway to commercialization, going through an FDA process, right, with clinical trials. Long time, very expensive. And so we looked at what other markets could we possibly apply some of that same methodology, and we quickly came to agriculture. And then all of the pieces came together. And so this was 2017, 2018. We discovered indoor farming, which is, I think indoor farming for most people is greenhouses, but it's much more than that. It's shipping containers, it's warehouses, vertical farms, greenhouses, kind of all of the above. And it was the holy grail. It was, not only do we have the ability to work with a biological system, a plant, if you will, that's non-regulated, meaning that there's no clinical trials needed to push new technology out, but working on an indoor farm, we could capture the data and then we could actually act on it, right? And so that was the genesis of the idea on AgEye. It was, we would be able to monitor all of these plants and all of these environmental conditions and have a precision ag to say, what does that specific plant need? And we could give it that element on demand. And so that was the big idea. As we started working with customers, we quickly realized that we were a little ahead of the market, right? So we would have conversations with customers and say, we're going to show you all of these items. And they say, that's great, but I'm still running my farm on spreadsheets, right? Excel is my day-to-day. And so quickly realized that we needed to move up the value chain a little bit more and start offering a full set of sensors and software to be able to support them. At the same time, 2019, that's when NVIDIA Jetson had come out. That's when Intel Movidius had come out, the ability to run edge deployed AI models locally on some of these low-power devices, low-power trips. And so we've enrolled in the NVIDIA Inception program, and so we were able to access a lot of the early hardware development boards to push out our AI models, right? And so for us, it was great. Now we have the ability to have a low-cost sensor solution that has edge-deployed AI, fantastic, and started capturing a lot of data. And that led us into having a massive database of just plants, characteristics of those plants, environmental factors that drive those plants. And then we started looking at how can we leverage that post-pandemic to actually have a true ERP, plant intelligence, crop modeling across the board. So that's where we are today.
Ooh, all right. There's a lot to cover there. So I have 1,000 questions. So it's 2017. You're running Iconic Solutions. And that was kind of a consultancy, right?
Yep.
And then you have this idea and you start doing that. At some point, you were running both those things. When did you make the choice to pinch one off and go full time on AgEye? What tipped you over that this was the thing?
I'll say in hindsight, shifting from a professional services company to a product company, I don't think people realize how difficult that was, right? I mean, professional services, it's you eat what you kill. You're always on the hunt for the next project, and your development roadmap is basically whichever your customer dictates to you, and you just deliver on it, which was good. And then going to a product company, obviously, as you know, very, very different from a day-to-day operations. And so in 2017, we started slowly reducing a lot of the outbound marketing that we would do for Iconic Solutions. We would still receive inbound inquiries that we would service and that we would do. By 2019, we had sunset all of the initiatives, and we just had a handful of retainer-based clients that we kept on, that we just did maintenance and support for some of the legacy apps. And then post-pandemic, we shut down fully and made the switch.
Okay, so that was a good time to kind of say this is a good time to.
It was a good time also because we started to get some early angel investments at that point, right? And it was okay, we've spun this idea out into a true operating company. We're taking outside investments, small but outside investments, and that was what we needed to be able to focus 100%.
Yeah. This is a fun time to tell how I met you. I went to lunch at a place. My friend Alex Lassner's like, let's go to a Korean barbecue or something. And I went to lunch at this place. And on the way there, I walked by this storefront that had a business in it at a strip mall, which is unusual. Not a strip mall, but a little frontage type thing. I guess a strip mall.
Yeah.
And I'm looking in there and it says AgEye, and I'm looking in the window and there's like robots and plants. And I was like, well, I'm insanely curious about this. And I walked in, and I don't think I met you. I think you were out. But like the person there was like, yeah, we're doing indoor farming and we have all this AI technology. And I was like, I didn't have a card, but I was like, I'm going to reach out. So I found you online and reached out. So it was a weird example of being in. I don't know if you're still there. It looks like you.
We moved. I mean, we definitely moved up.
I can't tell through the little window you're looking through. It looked kind of like that, but yeah. And I was like, wow, this is like invest by walking around. You never know.
Yeah, and let me tell you, that the characters that you see in a slightly rundown strip mall is always.
While I was there, my second time, like 8 people came in looking to see if you would fix their cell phones.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. We're not cell phone repair, ma'am.
But for us, it was. Again, you talk about the shift or the pivot from professional services to a product company. We then had to give a demo, right? And so obviously we were very hardware centric with robotics, and people wanted to see it, right? They'd say, okay, great. I don't want a PowerPoint. I don't want a video. Show me this. And I think it's maybe a good piece to key in on. In 2021, 2022, part of our business model was we would sell direct to consumer, direct to our farmers, right? B2B. But we also really wanted to double down on a channel strategy and do an OEM kind of, we would embed in other companies' systems. And so there was a company in Virginia called Dascom, and they sold a lot of the robotics for these indoor farms. And so we had an OEM agreement with them to include our software and a lot of the stuff that they sold. And fast forward, they ended up they wanted to spin that business unit out. We were able to acquire it, and so we acquired Hive and Dascom's the IP for that, and that allowed us to have a robotics offering, right? So it went from pure software to software AI to software AI IoT, and then a full stack with the robotics piece there.
Yeah. Okay, so this is helpful to other founders. So I meet a lot of founders that have an idea like yours, like, okay, there's this really interesting thing where we can use light and plants. Mm-hmm. And, technology's hard, but what's harder is go to market. And you're a business guy, so I'm kind of curious, how did you had this idea, and how did you find like the first customers? And the other thing that happens whenever I mention you guys to people largely outside the area that are, outside VCs, I'll say, and we have an indoor farming company, AgEye, that you should look at. And they'll say, we don't do cannabis. So, and then I have to explain, to my knowledge, you're not a big cannabis thing, right? Yeah. But everyone associates indoor farming with cannabis, which is fine, but that's not what you're about. So explain, number one, how did you go about, A, why don't you do cannabis? And then B, how did you find these first use cases for the technology is easy, customers are hard.
Yeah. And it was a constant just grind every day to try to figure out who was our target audience and how do we approach them. I mean, coming from an rPath background or even a professional services where, we're reaching out to other enterprise grade software companies and you could identify key decision makers just by LinkedIn, right? That was very easy. Coming into the indoor farming space, a lot of these head growers or farms that are owner operated, they don't have LinkedIn. They're not talking like that. So we found out that Reddit was one of the biggest conversational discussion places where we could find new customers. It was people that growers were asking other growers for feedback and opinion on Reddit. And so we became an active Reddit user. And early on, we honestly thought we would be focused entirely on cannabis. And so we went through the entire rigmarole of getting fully licensed. We still are a fully licensed hemp. We have a full license to grow hemp here in North Carolina. We've worked early on with cannabis growers on the West Coast and in the Midwest. I think fortunately or unfortunately, there was a lot of mismanagement of licenses on a state-by-state basis for cannabis, and it caused the market to really fall out. And because of that, it forced us to pivot towards high-value produce like leafy greens and tomatoes and strawberries and other fruiting crops. And so it was a pure we had an idea. We were forced through the market trends to shift to another target audience within that same market. And as we started reaching out to some of these customers that we would see on Reddit or we meet at trade shows, everybody was curious. I mean, I think that I just keep looking at all of these parallels between how different enterprise B2B SaaS software sales is and selling a product company. We were selling to an owner operator. So you've got the owner operator who's running the P&L, doing HR, and also the head grower. I mean, if it's a 4 to 15 person team, it was these guys needed help. And so if we would come in and say, we'd like to do a pilot or POC for you guys, they would welcome the opportunity. And if there was success, they would double down on it. And so it was really just putting ourselves out there saying, we've got something that you want to see. Indoor farming, I think, was just a little bit of a Cinderella story because these indoor farms, they go through harvest cycles typically once a month, right? So, for us in our mind, that was every single month there's a new at bat, meaning that if we focused initially on outdoor farms where they may just have a single harvest cycle per year, it's very difficult to get that farmer to say, sure, I'll devote this year to you guys, a startup, unknown, unproven. But with the indoor farmers, they're like, great, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe it doesn't help me this cycle, but I'm back to baseline next month.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you're selling to people that already have some form of indoor farm, and you're just basically upgrading. Maybe they have a manual system with humans, and it's not robotic and or AI type thing. Is that kind of like how your first ICPs you went after?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was point solutions, right? And so it was, you've got a greenhouse, give us a 10 square foot area of your greenhouse to put some sensors in and allow us to show you that data. I mean, something as very focused as that.
Yeah. And then did you have to start with proving out the plants first? Like, did you say, all right, we have an idea, let's try strawberries and leafy cabbages and this type of thing? Or did you get the ICP and that told you which plant to do?
Early on, it was focused a lot on leafy greens. And I think that's just because that's what a lot of these commercial growers were growing at that time. Lettuces, arugulas, basils, things like that. So I think that we inherently just doubled down on that. We've continued to work very closely with NC State's plant science and horticulture program. And so they've also been supporting on what are some of the key target crops that we should focus on just from an industry point of view. And so having some of that early access in the early days, at least, it gave us the insight to know, we're not focused on watermelons. We're not focused on sweet potatoes. We're focused on, X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
And then let's go back to the big picture. Let's pretend I know nothing about indoor farming, which is actually somewhat true. I always imagine these things would be like in areas that are so harsh that you can't grow stuff.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's always dark, like Iceland or something, or
Yep.
Greenland. And then, or it's like the Sahara Desert, like it's like Dubai. Like you would imagine they would have some of these because the desert environment is probably, very hard to grow a lot of the plants they want to.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that maybe is how it started, but that's not the type of customer you're selling to. Like, why are these folks doing it if they're in a already place that could grow crops?
I think in a place that can grow crops is a little bit of a misnomer, right? I mean, I think that as we look at where does food come from, there's significant food deserts that still exist here in the United States. Baltimore, Maryland, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, we have conversations with local co-op grocery stores, and they tell us very pointed that they have the inability to access any type of basil. Nobody's growing basil within North Carolina. They've got to go down to Georgia to get their basil. And so, just hearing things like that, North Carolina is an agriculture state, and these grocery stores are still having to go outside. And then you look at 80 to 85% of the leafy greens in the United States come from Salinas Valley, California, or Arizona. And, they've got great outdoor growing conditions until they don't, meaning that until there's a drought, until there's a flood, until, there's a restriction on water, whatever it may be. And those prices of crops skyrocket, right? And so I think that even the best places that you would think grow are just becoming more and more difficult. And so for us, we started looking at initially urban centers, right? So inside city populations, we found out that it's anywhere. So one of our early customers was a row crop farmer out in Nebraska. They wanted to add a supplement income by adding leafy greens and produce. And so that was one. Canada is a big grow market for exactly what you said. It's the weather is difficult in Canada. And so that's always been an attractive market to us. And just as of recently, as of 2 months ago, we've signed a formal partnership with a large company over in Qatar to be able to roll this out throughout the Middle East, because we see that that's a big piece. For us, we also grow. It's called livestock fodder, and so it looks like a sheet of sod, right? And we grow it very fast. It takes about 5 or 6 days, but you use this for camels, you use this for dairy, right? And so a lot of these places like the Middle East, that's attractive.
So it's at the bottom of the food chain, not the top. Interesting. And so how about cannabis? So a lot of people envision these big rooms full of cannabis plants. Is that something you guys considered, or wasn't it really a focus?
Yeah, and so we've done 5 or 6 pilots within cannabis facilities. They've all gone well. The nice thing about cannabis is the money generated from cannabis customers, just as an industry, has really paved the way for affordable technology across all of indoor farming, right? Cannabis growers, they had the margins and they had the capital to be able to buy advanced LED lighting, sensor software, a lot of things when prices were still very high, right? So you fast forward now and those investments have allowed things to be commoditized and the price to come down. And so we still are active in that. We've got a large investor group that is a multi-state cannabis license holder. And so that's still a very popular market for us.
Interesting. Okay. And then let's talk about the technology. So a lot of people are nerdy like I am on this. And so, one of my more popular pieces of content is talking about competitive moats in the AI era. So first of all, you've got a physical component to what you're doing and a set of proprietary learnings. You're on generation, certainly not under 3 of your system, the software and the hardware.
Correct.
So there's by being hardware and software, that gives you this interesting moat itself, where you have to build it linearly. There's no shortcuts. Someone couldn't just look at what you've done and really ascertain how you got there and decode it. They have to start. Maybe they could jump a couple levels by looking at what you've done, but they're not going to jump very far.
Sure.
So that's one mode. But then the other one is data. So talk a little bit about, you started this pre-AI and now we're in the AI era, and you've got the holy grail of competitive moats, proprietary data. Mm-hmm. So, and as you mentioned, you're cycling faster too, right? So you're doing 12 growth cycles a year. Maybe if it's that fodder thing, it's like 50, 60 or something like that.
Right.
So each one of these iterations, you've got a system that's sitting there learning about, I did X and Y and this was the outcome and I'm going to get better. And my yield was this. And I want to, this is perfect for AI because you know the goal, maximize yield, very easy goal to set. And, maybe minimize inputs, but maximize yield. There's probably a curve there. And you have the ability to collect the data to walk up that curve. Is that, how has that played out? Is that a pretty big competitive edge for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge edge. I mean, and so everything that we're doing is purposely built for the agentic era, right? That there's clear outcomes and clear goals to every one of these tasks that any of these agentic agents can be able to fulfill. And so, when we first started 2019, 2020, we would have a team of data annotators. And for a complex crop like a cannabis or a tomato or strawberry, perhaps, a really well-trained data annotator could probably annotate 30 to 35 images in one day, right? And that's the training data. And you just think about how much training data is needed. And so, we'd have a team of, we have a wholly owned subsidiary in Bangalore, India, where we had a team of data scientists and a team of data annotators that would just annotate all day, every day. You fast forward to that where it is now, and you've got all of these single shot models that self-annotate, that self-learn, just through text prompts. And it's like, oh my gosh, this opens up the ability to pull in so much more data to augment what we're looking at. And so we've got such a strong foundation of our data models from a plant point of view. And now we're starting to look at how else can we capitalize on this? And so an example of that is we've got a set of everything that we try to do is to have, how can we leverage the agentic model to generate business for our customers? And so one of them is the agents are looking at what's the demand for a specific type of crop, basil, arugula, kale, whatever it may be, within that target market where that farm is. And then the harvest cycles, the planning, when to plan, when to harvest, how much to harvest, is all driven based on that, right? So it's not just an arbitrary, I'm going to grow this and I'm going to harvest on that. It's all driven from what the market is. And that's being driven by the agentic model.
Got it. Do the learnings go across plants, or are like strawberries different than leafy vegetables, are different than cannabis? They're different than.
That's one of the areas that we learned early on is we would never get ahead of things if we had to train a model on every variety of plants that we could. There's too many varieties of these plants. And so we separated to say, we're going to have a leaf model, and that leaf model is going to work on 90% of the crops, cannabis, tomatoes, lettuce, whatever it is. A leaf model is a leaf model. And then, so we approached it that way, much more like a plant scientist would, as opposed to how you would typically think of AI and just say, okay, train a model, train a data pipeline on a strawberry, and then train it on a lettuce. We did a lot of subpart models on our pipeline, and then we would assemble those together just based on whatever crop it was.
Got it. Have you looked at licensing your model? So we have a couple portfolio companies that had a piece, that had a model that drove the piece.
Okay.
And then now they're monetizing the model and the data. Like there's a licensing model piece. It may be too early here, but
Sure.
There's a lot of the demand for tagged proprietary data is off the charts, and you kind of have a choice, which could be a little tricky. Do you use it proprietarily and it is the core of your advantage, or do you maybe license that out in some way? There's ways to license it out where the horses don't leave the barn, and then there's
Sure.
ways to just license the data and then the horses are out of the barn. And maybe the risk is you're creating a competitor, but you get in exchange, you get early, potentially big lucrative license of some kind.
Sure. So, are you thinking more like just a metered web service that somebody can tap into?
Yeah. Maybe I'm a competitor and I need a leafy vegetable model.
Sure. Yeah.
You could be where I could go for one. And you could just you could basically have a leafy vegetable Claude. You need to add water to unit 22, something like that. Has that come up at all or not yet?
I think that we've worked hard to everything. The entire architecture is a services first architecture, and we build it that way because there's legacy customers that have existing dashboards and existing sensors, and we didn't want that to be a gating factor for us to install. So we knew that we'd have to be able to play well with others. And so we've got the foundation to be able to, I think, expose some of that, but I think it's my opinion, it's a very different sales focus on how do we start, marketing that, monetizing that.
People start hunting for this thing and they find like this company may have one, and then they find it. Who knows? Maybe this podcast will send you a lead.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know how many people looking for leafy vegetable models. Listen,
we've got them.
We'll find out. We're about to find out. So explain. So you paint a picture with your words of how this works, right? So you've got this rack. We've all gone to like Lowe's and seen like a rack of little vegetables sitting there, like
Yep.
little basil plants or something, in their little containers. So explain, folks, how this works in your robotic system.
Yeah. So um, the towers are very customizable. Think of it as a Lego system, right? So a customer comes to us, they tell us the dimensions of their facility, which is typically a warehouse or a steel structure. We take that and figure out how many racks we could fit there. The racks are about 18 inches per level, and we could go up to 20 levels. 20 levels is about 36 feet tall. And on average, they're around 70 to 80 feet long. And the way that the robotics work is that every part from seeding all the way through harvest is fully roboticized. So we've got an automated seeder, and then we seed into a nursery. We've got a transplanter that looks like a kind of an oversized industrial tweezers, and it transplants from the nursery into the large plants. And then, I think it's important while we're talking about this, there's been a lot of money put into indoor farming technology. I mean, especially around COVID time, there was growers that were going public on SPACs with a valuation of excess of 500 million, 600 million, and they were doing in-house technology development. I mean, there was a group up in New Jersey and an indoor farm operator, and they had licensed CRISPR technology to do gene editing on seeds. I mean, and you're a grower, your product is lettuce, right? So anyway, so there was a lot of money invested. There was a lot of money wasted. And so we knew for us to be successful, we'd have to define and we'd have to build our automation that allowed these farms to have a true ROI. And so you're not going to, we've got fully roboticized systems, but it's not a Tesla factory, right? You're not seeing 3-arm access robots in our system. What you do see is very similar to these dark warehouses, right? So very simple pallet moving robots that move pallets back and forth with proximity sensors. That's the genesis of what we use for material moving, right? And so those type of robots are $3,000 retail. I mean, we build them ourselves, but very inexpensive. And so for a grower who's, may have 20% margins and, to have a capital budget on new technology, we've got to have an ROI within 3 to 4 years on them. And so that's allowed us to do it. So all of the robotics throughout the entire seeding harvesting process, it is purpose built for the farmers. We put them in, and because they're more low tech, I mean, it's all robots, but it's low tech, the failure point's very, very low, which is great for us.
Yeah, so they last a long time. And then are these things usually in like big data center? Because it looks a lot like a data center, I imagine.
Yeah,
They're just
very
like
much.
big warehousey looking buildings. And then so you have these racks, and then inside the racks there's a row, and then there is a tray or something.
Yep.
Like, what do you call that? A tray? Okay.
Yep.
and then so here's the floor, and then on top is and this may have changed. What I saw was there was a robot kind of on top of the plants, and it did the watering, or it had an eye and a camera.
We call that ARIS, autonomous robotic imaging system. And so that robot farming generally, even outdoor farming, it's generally done through just inherent knowledge of how good do my crops look, right? So whether you're a greenhouse grower or a row crop farmer, you absolutely do scouting on a day-to-day basis where you walk up and down your fields, you walk up and down your greenhouse. And so the ability to capture that as an imaging robot was key. And so we've got a device that scans all of the plants. It controls the elevator and goes to each level individually by itself. It sets its own routine. It has a NVIDIA Jetson inside, so everything is processed and inferenced directly on the edge. And it uses a combination of RGB sensors, LiDAR sensors, and FLIR thermal sensors to capture everything we can. And so with that, we're able to generate a 3D model of every single plant. And so with that 3D model from a top-down view, we can tell you the biomass, the weight, the canopy size, the growth rate, and even yield predictions, right? And so how does that translate to a customer? If you're a Harris Teeter and you're buying romaine lettuce from your farmer, Harris Teeter says your romaine lettuce has to be a certain size, a certain biomass, otherwise we're not going to buy it. Or traditionally, when you harvest in a farm, you weigh it at harvest time. And if it doesn't make the weight, you throw it out. I mean, so 20 to 25% waste is normal within these farms. For us to be able to have a real-time day-to-day as the plant is growing and tell you what that plant weighs and where it may be deficient, so that grower could start helping it to reach where it needs to be. And so that's the ability to show the grower which plants are at risk of you not being able to fulfill your offtake agreement with your customer, say Harris Teeter or Cisco Foods. That's how we bring it all together. So I think early on it was pre-COVID, we would capture data and we just show data on the dashboard and thought that's great. We quickly realized that it was overwhelming to our customers, as you can imagine. Why it makes sense. And we actually had to start making sense to a business, tie it back to the business on how can we take that data and help them improve.
Got it. So the ARIS system is sitting there and it's taking pictures of these plants through the whole thing. And that's just like the amount of data you must collect must
Massive.
Just be astronomical.
And we augment that with environmental data and
super nerdy thing, but which of the cloud platforms is this, an AWS? So
so we're a pure AWS shop.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then and does all that go into the model? I imagine it's okay. Yeah. That's the when did you guys realize that was the unlock? Pretty early on, or like?
I mean, I think it was just, we knew that the data would compound quickly. We were just, the amount of data on a day-to-day scanning, and we've got our own farm, we've got customer farms. And so I think that once we started realizing how quickly the data compounded, it was like, wow, light bulb moment.
Yeah, that's a lot of data.
That's a lot of data.
This is a weird sidebar, but I'm a big fan of the All In podcast, and one of those guys has Mahalo, which is a strawberry thing. Have you talked to them?
No,
I don't know if they do indoor or not. Okay, they have some variant of strawberries that are like bigger, plumper, more juicy or something. Yeah, it's worth. It's the other David. There's Craft Ventures David. I can't remember. David Freeberg. So Google that.
Okay, yeah.
That'd be a good marquee client for you.
Absolutely.
Maybe you get a shout out on that podcast. So you left rPath. You got to see how those guys built that, and then you started your own consulting thing, which is a little bit of different, but it's still founder mode. And then now you're company building, and so you've totally nailed it on the product. You've got your competitive moats. On the company building side, how has it been fundraising? So you and I had Spiffy, you had AgEye. It is very hard. There was a period of time, it's gotten better. I don't think it's ever easy. There was a period of time where it was near impossible to raise capital for a physical world thing because everyone wanted B2B SaaS, and you had indoor farming, robots, software. So how did you piece that together, and how much have you raised? Walk us through the company building journey.
To your point, right? Through a lot of the work that you guys have done personally, and then just with the way that the industry has changed with software, RTP is a little bit more diversified now. But you know this firsthand, right? 2015, 2020, it was pharmaceutical, life science, and pure SaaS software, right? That's the investor base here. And so to talk about a hardware centric or a heavy piece on this, it was hard to get early institutional investors excited. And so we were able to successfully leverage just an angel network, and we continued to parlay that on, a $50,000 check here, $100,000 check here. And that allowed us to get continued proof of concepts to push it. So to date, we've raised $5 million in outside capital. The real unlock, though, came from when I don't know how many no's and we'd had and how many doors were slammed in our face. We shifted and looked at corporate venture arms, right? And that was the real unlock for us on, okay, they're not as opposed to a hardware play. And so one of our largest investor to date and one of our earliest investors was a large agrochemical company called Nourion. They were based in the Netherlands. And so they're like a Syngenta or a BASF, right? And so for them, they saw the shift from traditional outdoor ag to greenhouses and vertical. And one of their large business units is fertilizer and crop nutrients, right? And so they were trying to understand, what does this look like, right? What is this market? So it was an investment into the technology, obviously, but also just more visibility into the early market trends. And so that was a great partnership that unlocked a lot of capital and a lot of resources. They brought us into some of their customers. And then we did that again with the Man Hummel group that, through your introduction. And so being able to just coincidentally have Man Hummel here, which is, for people that don't know, a large water and air filtration company based in Germany with an office here. But that was a perfect fit because, again, it was their primary business is focused on clean air, clean water. Those are two prereqs that you absolutely have to have for an indoor farm. So there was a lot of positivity there.
Interesting. How did you meet the was it Norway or Netherlands? How did you meet those folks?
One of our early angel investors had a connection there, and again, I mean, I not to say I was naive because I realized that through rPath, the power of network. But the network effect, I think that if I had to give any advice to anybody, and look, I mean, we're still grinding it out every day, but I just invest in the network because that it will yield tremendous returns. Maybe not immediate, but I think 95% of the investors and even customers, it's all been through introductions and even warm intros.
Awesome. I want to be cognizant of your time. You're a busy guy. You got plants to grow and customers to sell. Last question. Where do you see this going? Like, give us an update. Like, where is the company today? Like, I don't want revenue numbers, but give us a range of whatever scale, however you want to talk about it. And then, what's next for AgEye?
Yeah. So I mean, we think it's an exciting time, right? The product is fully built out, fully tested. We're on the 5th generation of the software, 3rd generation of the robotics. And so we're purely focused on commercialization. We've just signed 2 large-scale distributor contracts. So these are people that sell into farmers to be able to be a distributor for our technology. So that's huge. And then the Middle East partnership that I mentioned to you, this unlocks a new segment for us. It's going to be the hospitality and the F&B space, right? So a lot of these large-scale resorts, think Ritz-Carlton, think St. Regis hotels, that have these on-site restaurants. The big push there is to have on-site farms. So basically, what you saw at our old office with that farm shrunk down to a 20 by 20 square foot self-contained farm. And, the best way to describe it is it looks just like a miniaturized version of the library at NC State, right? The book retrieval system that pulls the book and then brings it to you, same way. And so we built that system for plants and allows chefs at these restaurants to basically key up whatever plant they want, brings it to them, they do a harvest, and then it goes back. And so being able to have that on site at some of these restaurants, we think that that's the next big piece for us.
Cool. So simultaneously channel and then going mini or kind of like, going small are 2 different areas that you're exploring.
Yeah. It's been difficult to really create an outbound strategy on how can I get a list to email people? How can I get a cold calls to some of these growers that are very project specific? And so we still do a lot of responses to RFPs and obviously all the inbound, but the outbound, we've seen tremendous success through the channel network.
Awesome. And if you know a farmer that may be interested in this or a restaurateur that wants to have a little mini grow station so they can have their own fresh leafy veggies, you know where to find Nick. That's a good last question. If people want to learn more, where do they go, Nick?
Sure. So our website is ageyetech.com. We've just moved into our new office. It's 2 minutes away from the Raleigh Ironworks building. And we've got a fully functioning demo system in here, Showcase Farm. We love to have visitors. We love to have people come by and taste the produce, see the robotics, see the software. And so at any time, reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nick. And remember, everyone, this is the type of company that's right here in your backyard. And as you go to have lunch with someone, keep your eyes open. You may stumble across the next big investment opportunity in the North Carolina ecosystem. Nick, thanks for joining us. I think you did great on your first podcast. So glad to get that in the rear view. May the next 100 podcasts be successful for you.
Thanks, Scott.
NC Tweener Talks is hosted by Scott Wingo, presented and produced by NC Tweener Fund, which is powered by NC Idea, with creative assets and design support from our friends at Walk West. That's it for today's episode. A big thank you to our guests, sponsors, and the team that makes this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves the startup stories coming out of the North Carolina Tweener Talks and the entire Tweener community.